John O'Reilly. It's really fantastic to have you with us today, John. As a former graffiti artist, John's early subjects were of areas he often painted graffiti in, including non-pedestrian environments such as the railway and abandoned sites. His recent paintings feature monolithic-like environment of asphalt and concrete, of fuel tanks, farms, and car parks, describing long pedestrian walks around vehicular infrastructures. So, welcome, John. And we are now going to have a bit of an informal conversation about your work. So, just to start, we would like to ask you if you could give us a brief overview of your work and your artistic background.
Yeah, so I started doing graffiti back in 1993 when I was a teenager, and I did that for about 10 years. And that introduced me to explore. Like, I grew up in the city center, close to the city center. Even though I always lived in the city, getting into graffiti really kind of opened like I explored the city in a whole new way. Would be like just all kinds of areas, all over town, all over the suburbs, industrial areas, abandoned sites. And then I guess what I found really interesting was being in kind of non-pedestrian kind of areas, like, and restricted areas, and the railway especially. So when I got into oil painting, I first started painting, those subjects to present kind of environments that the average citizen wouldn't see. So you might just live a few minutes down the road from the railway or a railway yard or something, but you've never been down there, or there might be certain places, other kind of accessible places like industrial estates or something, and that people just don't see, but some of them are really, really interesting. Simply like the railway anyway, when I was younger, I just found it so atmospheric, and it's so quiet, and there's so much like wildlife and stuff in places like this, which is actually the same in the Docklands, or the Dublin port, where all the container yards are, and the petrol tank farms and stuff like that, like what's on the screen right now. They are like they're full of wildlife. They're just amazing areas. They're really interesting areas. You have this intense kind of industrialization, and there's no people there. There's like but they're very sparsely populated, but they're total human environments. Yet they have hawks and all these creatures. But yeah. So anyway, it was just natural to start painting those kind of areas when I first got into oil painting. And generally I've kind of slowly moved on to it's getting deeper and deeper into the urban environment, and especially with transport. I'm pretty interested in transport as a major theme throughout my work. So like I had a solo show in 2012, and it was all about kind of like environments that are built to support transport. So like I guess like if whoever, if you invent like if a certain technology, you don't always foresee the huge support structure that might be needed to be created to support all that stuff. And with transport, it's a very kind of it's a very obvious physical one. I mean, we have car parks and roads everywhere, and stuff like that. Now, I know there's other technology that are a bit more harder to see, and sometimes the support structures are harder to see. But I think for transport, I think it's I think it's very interesting, actually.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So let's talk a little bit more now about the role of the artist in a time of crisis like the one that we are experiencing now.
Yeah. So well, I guess like a lot of us, even though like you can view a lot of art online or in print, there's also that experience like going to the cinema or being at a music venue where you're totally immersed. It's just a space for you to be totally immersed um, with the artwork, you know, so you can just temporarily remove yourself from reality and go into this place and really just have the space and the the calm to just take in the artwork, you know, like the gallery. Actually, it's such a total like separate subject, but like the gallery itself like adds so much to a show, you know. um but that unfortunately that's missing at the moment, you know. Like I haven't said that now, like I mean I'm a big fan of Van Gogh, but I don't think I've ever seen any of his paintings in the flesh. So you know, if a painting or other art form that can be enjoyed physically, but if it can also, you know, if it can also transform over different media, I mean that's pretty. It shows how powerful it is. But yeah, it is anyway. It is something like I mean I miss going to the cinema a lot, and I obviously miss going to art shows. Um, because it's just great to be able to go in there and just have the space to really get immersed in something, you know.
So absolutely. So yeah, it's a bit like what we are doing here with like a sort of a, a surrogate of the
Yeah,
real thing, right? But it can work at the same. It's a different experience, obviously, but it can have some really positive sides as well, as you were saying
yeah,
about the paintings that are, you know, even if they are reproductions, they can still be of they can be still be an inspiration, etc.
yeah.
So yeah, thank you very much. It was very fascinating. Let's now talk a little bit more about the environment. So you already mentioned the urban environment, and you can actually you might want to talk a little bit more about that. But can you also give us a sense also of the natural environment? What does that mean for you in your work and your art?
Like when you say natural environment, you mean like
Well, the physical environment in general, like whatever is. So I would say the juxtaposition of the man built and the natural is very powerful in your work. So I was just wanted to, if you could actually expand a little bit on that. I mean, I think it's important, you know, that we see when you look at your paintings, we see a lot of spaces that are devoid of human presence, for
yeah,
instance.
sure, yeah.
So I was wondering, I mean, that kind of empty space, what is the meaning for you? I mean, what is the sense that you give to this kind of emptiness in the space?
Yeah, sure. Well, um as I said when I first started painting these environments, it was coming from that kind of background of being in a place where you know, say with the railway there'd be no one around there, or abandoned places and stuff, but also you know, you'd be in parts of the city at night time, so it's quite quiet then. But anyway, I continued on with that because I actually do think it's fascinating, as I said earlier, where say in a more accessible place like Dublin Port, that you can walk around a fair, like you know, you might not be able to go onto some specific sites, but you can generally walk around the you know, the public streets around there, and they're quite empty, and it's just like it's just all this um uh it's all this like you know, just total human environment, but there's just this no one around. And like say with Dublin Port, it's like it's all, a lot of that are facilities. A lot of the facilities there are for, I guess they're for transport. I mean, there's all those. There's a lot of storage tank farms there. For like fuel. I guess it's oil and petrol, but there's so many of them around there, and it's all for these human kind of for human consumption and activity and stuff. But there's just no one around there. It's really interesting, you know. But um, it's also like what I actually, one thing that I don't know if it's really in those, some of those images, but another thing I'm quite fascinated about, and I put in a lot of my earlier stuff, was overgrowth, especially in like abandoned sites where I guess it's kind of like I guess like that image there, like nature's kind of coming back in there. And I think a lot of people at the time, they thought it was quite depressing if there was a kind of an abandoned area and there's all this overgrowth. But it's quite nice. It's just um, it's a different way to experience, like, if you live in a very built up area, it's just a different way to experience some kind of wildlife, because we'd be used to a lot of city parks and all, which are quite, which is good, they're maintained, which is great, but it's nice to see something wild. And when you do go down to some of the more like kind of side streets of in Dublin Port or in industrial estates, you'll see some pretty cool like wildlife, a lot of overgrowth. And down on the railway there'll be quite a bit of it, because there's some large spaces down there, like really really wide open spaces, which is really interesting as well, when if you're in an inner city area which is really built up, and then you climb over a wall and you're into this like kind of like urban pasture. um when I was a kid, like we grew up beside a railway, so I as a kid, even I kind of myself and my friends went down to the railway a lot, and we really liked it down there because it's just so spacious and relaxing. But there's a lot of overgrowth there in some of those large spaces, and then like railways kind of not as, certainly in Ireland anyway. Um, some lines are disused now, are not as used as they used to be, and there'll be a lot more overgrowth in those places. So I think that's really interesting, as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was very fascinating. Just a very final brief question about
Yeah.
something that you mentioned during our exchange of emails. This idea to read the built environment archaeologically. Can you say something more about it, just very briefly? I mean,
Yeah, well, actually, it's well, for me anyway. I mean, it's not. It's just a very simple way of trying to look at something from a fresh perspective, something that you're so used to, something, especially if it's really banal, like to try and look at something that's right there, and look at it from just a fresh perspective. And I guess like if you have a medieval archaeological site or something else from the past, you naturally just have a detachment to it. But it can be hard to detach yourself sometimes from like things that are right in your face. um Although like I do think travel is a great thing for that, like if you just go to, you could even go to another country that has a similar culture to yours, but there'll still be things that really stick out, and just subtleties in just day-to-day things that are different, that really kind of, really opens up your senses a bit to kind of just have that fresh look on things. And if you can try and do that, I try and do that anyway with my art. It's one of my, I just would simply like to present something that's banal or marginal, and just have it there to just pause for a second and like, you know just reconsider it, I guess, or just try and detach yourself just for a few minutes from it.
fantastic, John. Thank you so much for sharing your art and your thought with us.
Thanks. See you.
See you.